The story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a beloved children's film from Disney. Most people don't know that the Disney adaptation is highly sanitized, and the original version is deeply rooted in folklore with a history far darker than one would believe if they'd only seen the Disney version. Today, we are going to explore the dark history of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny here, and today we are going to explore the dark history of the beloved children's movie slash story, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Before that, though, I want to make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Spooky Lawyer. Please like this video, it takes only a second and it helps me out a lot. And please share this video. Share this video with your coworkers. Just go up to their computer and just type in the URL, youtube.com/@thespooky-lawyer, hit enter and say, hey, here you go. Here's Kenny. HR, your boss, your coworkers, they'll all love it. Trust me. Most people recognize Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as a Grimm fairy tale. However, there are actually pre-Grimm origins to the story. There is a story from 1634 by Giambattista Basile named The Young Slave, which was a precursor to Snow White. It's a tale that involves a girl named Lisa, cursed by her aunt, to sleep in a crystal coffin. And although it lacks the Seven Dwarfs, it shares the same themes of jealousy, poisoning, and being brought back to life. Snow White is a traditional German folktale that was passed down orally for generations before being written down by the Grimm brothers. The brothers collected stories from various folklore and various tales and combined elements from different versions to their published tales. Some scholars have also suggested links to ancient myths. For example, the Greek myth of Shion, whose name means snow, involves a woman of exceptional beauty cursed into a deep sleep, echoing Snow White's enchanted slumber. In this myth, Shion is assaulted by gods and punished for boasting of her beauty, a darker parallel to Snow White's plight driven by vanity. Margaretha van Waldeck was a German countess known for her beauty and a possible historical inspiration to the story. She had a strange relationship with her stepmother, possibly evil stepmother. She fell in love with Prince Philip II of Spain, but died young, possibly poisoned, due to political and religious reasons. Her family owned copper mines where child labors due to poor conditions and stunted growth were nicknamed poor dwarfs, potentially inspiring the Seven Dwarfs. Maria Sophia von Erthel, who was living in Lohr am Main, Germany, was said to be a beautiful but dominated by her stepmother, also possibly evil. Her father owned a mirror factory, and local legends and objects in Lohr am Main, like a talking mirror, are linked to the tale. The Grimm brothers version was published in 1812 and then later republished in 1857. And the story focuses on the destructive nature of vanity and envy. The evil queen's obsession with beauty is a central theme in Snow White. Her self-worth is entirely dependent on being the fairest of them all, as confirmed by her magic mirror. The obsession drives her to commit heinous acts, including the attempted murder of Snow White and cannibalism, which we'll get to. The story highlights the destructive nature of vanity and the societal pressure on women to conform to unrealistic beauty standards. The color symbolism in the story further emphasizes the obsession with appearance. Snow White is described as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony wood. This description not only highlights her beauty, but also connects her to specific societal ideals of feminine appearance, with white skin being a particularly prized attribute. One of the more disturbing aspects of the Grimm's version of Snow White is the evil queen desires to consume Snow White's lungs and liver. Why lungs and liver? Well, there's symbolism reasons for that, of course, but also, yuck, lungs? I never liked liver either, but lungs? This desire can be interpreted as an attempt to literally ingest her beauty and youth, further highlighting the disturbing lengths to which she'll go for her vanity and to be young and beautiful. The evil queen's jealousy of Snow White's beauty fuels her violent actions. She orders a huntsman to kill Snow White and bring her back her heart as proof. Now, how they would know that it was her heart, I don't know, but that's the story. When this fails, she doesn't give up. The queen makes 3 attempts on Snow White's life. First, she disguises herself as an old peddler woman and offers Snow White bodice laces, which she ties so tightly that Snow White faints. Next, she disguises herself again and gives Snow White a poisoned comb. Most people don't realize, but hair poison is a particularly bad poison. Finally, she uses a poisoned apple to successfully kill Snow White. Unclear what type of apple it was. Hopefully it was like a Honeycrisp and not some trash Red Delicious apple. Right. In the original version of the story, the queen eats what she believes to be Snow White's lungs and liver, which is, again, disturbing. The story depicts the destructive consequences of unchecked jealousy and the potential violence within family. Now, in the Grimm's version, it's not her stepmother, it's her actual mother. Snow White reflects the traditional gender roles and female subjugation prevalent in the 19th century. Snow White is portrayed as a passive domestic figure, primarily valued for her beauty and subservience. She's expected to keep house for the dwarves in exchange for her shelter. The story emphasizes the idea that a woman's worth is tied to her appearance and her ability to fulfill domestic duties. The passive portrayal contrasts sharply with more modern adaptations where Snow White is depicted as an active and independent character. This shift in representation reflects changing societal attitudes towards female agency and empowerment. Now, the evil queen is the stepmother, and even more disturbingly, Snow White's biological mother in the original version of the story. She holds a position of power, which she abuses by trying to eliminate Snow White. The story highlights how those in positions of authority can exploit their power for personal gain and inflict harm on others without empathy or conscience. After Snow White's death, the prince is fascinated with Snow White's lifeless body when she's in her glass coffin. I mean, this is necrophilia. He is captivated by her beauty even though she is dead. In the original Grimm tale, the prince doesn't kiss Snow White awake or back to life. Instead, he takes her body from the dwarves, and she awakens when his servants stumble and dislodge the piece of apple from her throat. A psychological interpretation of Snow White offers further insights into its disturbing themes. The evil queen's actions can be seen as a manifestation of her own internal struggles and insecurities. Her obsession with beauty stems from her fear of aging and losing her status. Her violence towards Snow White is a projection of her own self-hatred and a desire to destroy a younger, more beautiful version of herself. The queen's inability to cope with aging and the perceived loss of beauty reflects broader societal anxiety about female aging and the devaluation of women as they grow older. The story also explores the concept of the death drive, as exemplified by the prince's attraction to Snow White's corpse. This drive, according to Freud, represents an unconscious desire to return to an inanimate state. It's important to understand the historical and cultural context in which the Brothers Grimm collected and published this story and their other fairy tales. The Grimms were influenced by the Romantic movement, which emphasized emotion, individualism, and fascination with the past. They aimed to preserve German folklore and create a sense of national identity. Their tales often reflected the harsh realities of life in the 19th century, including poverty, violence, and societal inequities. The Grimms collected stories from various sources, including oral traditions and written accounts. They often edited and revised these stories, sometimes to make them more suitable for children or to align with their own moral or social views. The process of adaptation and censorship has contributed to the evolution of fairy tales over time. For example, the Grimms sanitized the stories by removing sexual content and increasing violence, reflecting their own biases and the social norms at the time. The disturbing themes in Snow White have been adapted and censored in different versions and retellings. The Disney adaptation significantly softens the violence and removes the more disturbing elements, such as the attempted cannibalism and the queen's gruesome death. In the original Grimm tale, the queen is forced to wear red-hot iron shoes and dance until she dies. Oof. I guess that's a different interpretation on red-bottom shoes, huh? The sanitation of the story is part of a broader trend of adapting fairy tales for children and removing content deemed inappropriate. Recent adaptations, such as Snow White and the Huntsman, have revisited the darker aspects of the story, exploring the psychological complexities of its characters and the violence inherent in the original tale. This re-examination of the darker themes suggests a growing interest in exploring the complexities of fairy tales and their relevance to contemporary issues. And also the importance of the original text and what the original text means. Going back to the original text of these stories is important. You can create a more compelling story by taking the story that everyone knows and going back to its roots. Now, the most well known version of the story is the animated Disney version of the story. And while both the Grimm brothers fairy tale and the animated Disney movie both tell the story of a beautiful princess, they differ significantly in their details, tone, and themes. The Brothers Grimm version is a traditional folktale, and it's a darker, more violent, morally ambiguous, reflecting the oral storytelling traditions from which it originated. The tone is unsettling, with a focus on jealousy, revenge, and harsh punishments. Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which was released in 1937, which is crazy that it's that old, but softens many of the Grimm's darker elements and emphasizes romance, humor, and a clear cut sense of good versus evil. The tone is optimistic and heartwarming instead of dark and disturbing, which is typical of Disney's classic animation style. In the Brothers Grimm version, the queen's primary motivation is vanity and envy of Snow White's beauty. She desires to be fairest of them all and is enraged when the magic mirror declares Snow White is more beautiful. She believes eating Snow White's heart will grant her immortality. The queen's vanity in the Disney version is also her main motivation. The magic mirror's pronouncement that Snow White is the fairest in the land triggers her jealousy and desire to eliminate her stepdaughter. The desire for immortality is absent in the Disney version. In the Brothers Grimm version, Snow White is portrayed as more passive and reliant on others for rescue. While kind, she is less proactive in shaping her destiny. She makes mistakes, like being tricked by the queen multiple times, highlighting the fact that she was naive. Disney's Snow White is more innocent, cheerful, and optimistic. She's more proactive in establishing a home with the dwarves, offering to cook for them and clean for them. She embodies classic Disney princess traits: kindness, purity, gentle charm. In the Brothers Grimm version, the queen makes 3 attempts on Snow White's life. The huntsman is ordered by the queen to kill Snow White and bring back her lungs and liver, which was later changed to her heart, as proof. Why they went from lungs and liver to heart, it's unclear. I don't know why that's better or worse. But the huntsman relents and brings back animal organs instead. Next, the queen, disguised as an old peddler woman, offers Snow White a beautiful bodice and tightens the laces so much that Snow White faints, but is then saved by the dwarves. Again, disguised, the queen offers Snow White a poisoned comb, which causes Snow White to faint, but she's again saved by our dwarf friends. Finally, disguised as a peasant woman, the queen tricks Snow White into eating a poisoned apple. This time, the dwarves cannot revive her. The Disney version simplifies the attempts to one primary attempt after the huntsman fails, the poisoned apple. The queen, transforming herself into a wicked witch, directly poisons an apple and tricks Snow White into eating it. In the Brothers Grimm version, the prince is not present until after Snow White is in the glass coffin. He is captivated by her beauty when she's dead and convinces the dwarves to let him take the coffin. Snow White is awakened when the coffin bearers stumble, dislodging the poisoned apple piece from her throat. It's a more accidental, less romantic, Hollywood classic awakening. In the Disney version, Prince Charming appears earlier in the story, briefly meeting Snow White before she flees into the forest. He is the one who awakens Snow White with love's first kiss, a classic romantic trope central to the Disney narrative. In the Brothers Grimm version, the queen is invited to Snow White's wedding, unaware that it is Snow White marrying the prince. Upon arrival, she is forced to wear red-hot iron shoes and dance until she dies as punishment for her wickedness. This is a gruesome ending. In the Disney version, the evil queen falls to her death when chased by the dwarves and is struck by lightning on a cliff. Her death is less gruesome and more of a consequence of her actions in a dramatic chase scene. The queen/stepmother in the Brothers Grimm version is a vain, jealous, and cruel queen driven by envy and a desire for immortality. Her punishments are harsh, and her end is brutal. In the Disney version, the evil queen is also vain and jealous, but her character is somewhat more theatrical and less overtly gruesome. Her transformation into the witch is a key visual element, emphasizing her visual nature. The dwarves in the Brothers Grimm version are unnamed and more generic, representing working class figures of the forest. They are practical and cautious, offering Snow White shelter in exchange for housework. The 7 dwarves in the Disney version are given distinct personalities and names: Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, Dopey. They are more comical, endearing, becoming central, lovable characters in the story, adding warmth and humor. The prince in the Brothers Grimm version is a more incidental character who appears at the end and is primarily motivated by Snow White's beauty. In the Disney version, Prince Charming is more romanticized. He's enchanted by Snow White singing and actively seeks her out, playing a more significant role in the narrative and her rescue. The central themes of the Brothers Grimm version include vanity, jealousy, good versus evil, although a less clearly defined good versus evil, the dangers of beauty, and the consequences of wickedness. The story also touches upon themes of survival, deception, and revenge. The Disney version is more focused on the triumph of good over evil, the power of love, especially romantic love, innocence, kindness, and the idea of happily ever after. It simplifies the moral landscape and emphasizes clear virtues and vices. The Brothers Grimm version ends with the gruesome punishment of the queen dancing to death in hot iron shoes at Snow White's wedding, highlighting justice and retribution in a very graphic way. The Disney version ends with Snow White being awakened by the prince's kiss and riding off to her kingdom for happily ever after. In the significant amount of time since the Disney version, there have been many modern retellings of the Snow White story, and those have revisited the darker aspects of Snow White. Many retellings, like Snow White and the Huntsman and Mirror Mirror, explore the evil queen's motivations and darkness in greater depth, making her a more complex and central character. They exemplify a trend of humanizing or finding sympathetic angles in classic villains. Some of the retellings also critique the original story's passivity of Snow White, offering more empowered versions of the character who actively fight back against the queen and shape their own destinies. Retellings of these stories often go into psychological horror of the story, emphasizing the queen's obsessive narcissism, Snow White's vulnerability, and the unsettling elements of the fairy tale world. Films like Snow White, A Tale of Terror, present a genuinely frightening version, emphasizing a dark fairy tale element. Some postmodern retellings subvert the traditional narrative, playing with the audience expectations and exploring darker, more ambiguous themes. These examples include graphic novels, horror films, and fractured fairy tales that may twist the happily ever after and expose the disturbing undertones of the original story. In some modern adaptations, like the film Grimm's Snow White, the gruesome punishment of the red-hot iron shoes is reinstated, reflecting a return to the grimmer aspects of the original folklore. Like most stories that Disney films were based on, Snow White has a long and complex history. The Disney version that most people know is sanitized from the original folklore, and the original folklore contained darker elements that are crucial to understanding the story's historical and cultural context, and its enduring power to fascinate and disturb. Make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Please like and share this video. Please make sure that you follow me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is akbrews. Also follow me on Twitter. My username is akbrews there. If there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. There is a super thanks button in the YouTube toolbar. If you would like to make a donation to the channel, please click that button, make a donation. I would appreciate that. Any money that this channel makes is going to go back into the channel. I have a lot of great ideas for some, spooky live trips, some spooky trips that we're going to go on this spring and summer. Some on-location spooky videos I would like to film, and, donating money helps accomplish and create those videos. So I would appreciate that. Regardless, I appreciate you watching my video, and I appreciate your support. Supporting me has meant a lot to me, creating this channel and building this channel up. And the fact that you all watch these videos is incredible to me. So I'm very grateful. Thank you for that. And of course, please make sure that you stay spooky.